Welcome to Bedtime Astronomy. Explore the wonders of the cosmos with our soothing Bedtime Astronomy podcast. Each episode offers a gentle journey through the stars, planets, and beyond, perfect for unwinding after a long day. Let's travel through the mysteries of the universe as you drift off into a peaceful slumber under the night sky.
Imagine stepping out of your front door, right? And your front porch is bathed in sunlight, but it's at a blistering 250 degrees Fahrenheit.
You'd practically be baking.
Exactly. You are literally baking. But then the moment you step off that porch and your foot lands in the shadow of a tree, the temperature instantly plummets to minus 300 degrees.
And that transition takes less than a second.
Less than a second. It's wild.
Right. And because there's no atmosphere up there, there's no ambient air to soften that transition at all.
No breeze to distribute the heat or anything.
No, nothing. It is just the raw, completely unfiltered radiation of the sun or the absolute freezing void of deep space.
And that is the daily reality of the lunar surface. It's just a completely hostile, violently extreme environment. Yet right now, as you're listening to this, we are watching one of the most aggressive, incredibly ambitious projects in human history unfold in real time.
Aiming directly for that exact environment.
Right. We are talking about the absolute sprint to establish a permanent human presence on the moon by 2029.
Which is an incredibly tight window.
It's basically tomorrow in aerospace terms.
Wow.
And the sheer scale of this endeavor, it's enough to make your head spin. We are looking at a brand new $20 billion strategic pivot. We're dealing with a spectacular, literal, explosive setback involving a major tech billionaire's hardware.
Yeah, that was a massive hurdle.
Huge. And we're witnessing this desperate, almost MacGyver-style scramble to just throw equipment together to beat the clock.
Because the timeline alone is staggering. We are shifting completely away from that romanticized mid-century idea of space exploration.
Like the Apollo days.
Exactly. Where we just, visit a location, plant a flag, take some rocks, and come home.
Right.
This new plan is about laying down heavy, permanent infrastructure in an environment that actively wants to destroy everything we put there.
So today we're going to break down every single piece of this puzzle for you. We're unpacking the newly announced robotic vanguard that's heading to the moon right now.
It's a really fascinating approach they're taking.
It really is. And we're going to decode why the space agency suddenly abandoned its plans for this pristine orbiting space station in favor of a really messy dirt-level surface base.
And the dirt itself is a huge part of that problem.
Oh, we are definitely getting into the dirt. And we're also diving deep into the intense, breathing down your neck, international competition that's forcing these engineers to make some incredibly risky decisions. Because honestly, you cannot understand the engineering of this lunar base without understanding the geopolitical fires burning right behind it.
No, you really can't. Engineering in a vacuum, both literally and figuratively, it just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Every single choice about suspension systems or power grids or landing sites, all of it is being dictated by political and temporal pressures.
So let's start with this Vanguard, because before any human boots actually hit the lunar dirt, there's just a massive amount of prep work that has to happen.
Right.
NASA just announced 3 brand new uncrewed missions designed specifically to lay the groundwork for this future surface space.
Yeah, these are entirely autonomous.
Right, but they aren't building these robots in-house at some government lab, which I found really interesting. They just awarded contracts totaling nearly $600 million to 3 different U.S. companies to deliver this cargo.
Which is a huge deal. The cargo itself represents a fundamental shift in strategy for the agency.
How so?
Well, it includes complex scientific instruments, sure, but the core objective here is foundational infrastructure. This builds on some earlier announcements they made back in May, and it all points toward a total reliance on autonomous robotic vehicles.
To just build the base before we get there?
Literally build the environment that future astronauts will step into, yeah.
I'm trying to wrap my head around the mechanics of this, though, because, when we build a house on Earth, you have contractors coordinating, right?
Right.
The plumber talks to the electrician, you pour the concrete, you frame the walls. Doing this with autonomous robots millions of miles away in a total vacuum? How does an uncrewed infrastructure build actually function in reality?
Well, we have to look at the historical contrast first. So during the Apollo missions, humans were the primary operators of everything.
They were hands-on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The astronauts landed the module themselves. They manually deployed the solar wind experiments on the dirt.
Yeah.
They physically drove the rover around.
Right.
Now, the approach is entirely decentralized. This robotic vanguard, they're tasked with surveying this chaotic terrain, identifying the safest landing zones, and theoretically laying down the early stages of power distribution, all without humans.
It's like hiring 3 independent contractors to drop off lumber, run the electrical lines, and pour a foundation on a completely empty lot. But they aren't allowed to talk to each other.
And they're doing it in the dark.
Right, and the architect hasn't even finalized the blueprints for the house yet. The margin for error seems incredibly thin here. If one company's robot fails to deploy a power relay, does the other company's habitat module just freeze to death on arrival?
Basically, yes. The synchronization required is immense. I mean, think about it. On Earth, if the lumber is late, you just reschedule the framers for next Tuesday.
Right, no big deal.
But in space, orbital mechanics completely dictate your launch windows.
So you can't just delay a few days.
Exactly. If a piece of infrastructure misses its delivery window, you can't just send another delivery truck the next day. You might have to wait months for the planets to align, literally, which throws that entire 2029 deadline into serious jeopardy.
Wow.
And coordinating 3 separate commercial entities, each with their own proprietary hardware, their own software, trying to get them to seamlessly integrate on a hostile world is a logistics puzzle we have never truly solved before.
That is terrifying. Let's talk about the money side of this puzzle, too, because that $600 million is a number that really stands out.
It does.
To you or me, that's generational wealth. But in aerospace, where a single rocket engine can cost $50 million just to develop and test, $600 million to lay the foundation of a lunar base seems suspiciously cheap.
It is very cheap.
Is this actually enough capital to get the job done, or is this just like a down payment?
Oh, it's entirely a down payment. It's basically a mechanism to seed the market.
Okay, what does that mean?
So, NASA isn't actually buying the physical vehicles anymore. They're purchasing the delivery service.
Ah, like a courier.
Exactly like a courier. It's a fixed-price contract model. They go to the companies and tell them, look, we will give you this set amount of money if you deliver our payload to this specific crater on the moon.
And if it costs the company more to build the rocket?
The companies are expected to invest their own private capital to make up the difference. The gamble for them is that once they develop the technology, they can sell similar delivery services to other nations or private industries or whoever else wants to go to the moon.
So NASA is basically acting as an anchor tenant in a brand new shopping mall.
That's actually a great way to put it, yeah.
Hoping their initial investment convinces the developers to actually finish building the mall.
That is a very accurate way to view this commercial lunar payload strategy. But to your point about the money, the true financial weight of this entire endeavor really becomes clear when you look at the broader overarching budget.
Right.
That's $600 million for the robotic vanguard. It is absolute pocket change compared to the staggering $20 billion the agency recently pledged to the surface-based effort as a whole.
$20 billion. And that $20 billion pledge is where this whole story takes a wild left turn, I think. Because up until very recently, March of this year, to be exact, a permanent base in the lunar dirt wasn't even the main objective.
It wasn't. For the last decade, really, the crown jewel of the entire lunar return architecture was a project called Gateway.
The orbital space station.
Yes. Gateway was designed to be this highly sophisticated space station in lunar orbit. Think of it as a floating harbor.
Okay.
The logic was totally sound. Astronauts would launch from Earth, they'd dock at Gateway, live in a relatively safe orbital environment, conduct their research up there, and then take small landing craft down to the surface for short excursions.
Just day trips, basically.
Right, before returning safely to the station in orbit.
But then in March, the agency dramatically overhauled that entire architecture. They just hit the pause button on Gateway completely and pivoted the entire $20 billion to surface operations.
It's a massive shock to the industry.
They just abandoned orbit for the dirt. And I really want to figure out why. Does this pivot mean Gateway was fundamentally a flawed concept? Or is an orbiting station just a luxury they realize they don't have the time or money to build before 2029?
Well, it's definitely not flawed. Gateway is mathematically and logically sound, but it represents a totally different philosophy of space exploration.
Which is?
An orbital station is a known quantity for us. We have over 20 years of continuous human habitation on the International Space Station. We know how to do it.
Right, the ISS.
Orbit is a controlled void. Yes, you have to deal with radiation and microgravity, which are tough, but it's a clean environment.
Clean.
Very clean. The lunar surface, on the other hand, is arguably the most unforgiving, mechanically destructive environment we have ever attempted to inhabit.
And it really comes down to the dust, right? The regolith. I feel like people hear lunar dust and they immediately picture, like, sand at a beach. But that's entirely wrong, isn't it?
It is entirely wrong, and frankly, the fundamental chemistry and physical structure of lunar regolith is terrifying from an engineering perspective.
Terrifying.
Terrifying. Sand on Earth, as you mentioned, has been tumbled and smoothed by water and wind for millions of years.
Right, the edges get rounded off.
Exactly. But on the moon, there was no wind. There's no water. There's zero weathering whatsoever. For billions of years, the surface has just been relentlessly bombarded by micrometeorites, traveling at tens of thousands of miles per hour.
So these tiny rocks just smash into the moon.
They smash into the bedrock and they generate immense heat and pressure in a fraction of a second.
What?
So the rock flashes into a liquid melt instantly. And then, because it's exposed to the freezing vacuum of space, it instantly solidifies again.
Into what?
Into microscopic, jagged shards of glass.
So every single particle of dust is literally a tiny razor-sharp piece of shrapnel.
Yes. Shrapnel that also happens to carry an electrostatic charge.
Oh, why is it charged?
Because it's constantly bombarded by unfiltered solar radiation.
Right.
So it clings to absolutely everything. It gets into the microscopic seals of spacesuits and degrades the rubber. It works its way into the joints of rovers and grinds away the lubricants.
Just eats right through it.
Yeah. During the Apollo missions, astronauts actually reported that the regolith wore completely through layers of their Kevlar boots in just a matter of days.
Wore through Kevlar. In days. That is insane. And that is exactly what makes this $20 billion pivot so shocking to me. Because orbit is the clean room, right? And the surface is a trench filled with electrostatically charged glass shards.
That's a perfect analogy.
Committing to a surface base means you are deciding, hey, let's stop visiting the clean room and start living permanently in the trench.
Right. You have to solve the dust problem, the extreme thermal swings we talked about, the radiation shielding, all of it. And you have to do it permanently on the ground.
It just forces a complete realignment of all your technology.
It does. Because if you don't have Gateway hovering above you to act as a communication relay or a safe haven or a massive supply depot, your surface base has to be incredibly robust right out of the gate.
You have no safety net orbiting above you.
None. If a life support system fails on the surface, you cannot simply launch a lifeboat up to Gateway to wait for a rescue ship from Earth. You're entirely on your own.
Which brings up the next critical piece of this puzzle, honestly. If you are going to bet $20 billion on a piece of lunar real estate, and you're going to commit to fighting the jagged glass and the brutal temperatures, you don't just throw a dart at a map of the moon to pick a spot.
No, absolutely not.
You have to place that base where the absolute most valuable resource is located.
And that leads us to the strategic heart of this entire 2029 initiative, which is the lunar South Pole.
Location, location, location.
Exactly.
The planned site for this base is specifically targeted at the South Pole region, and the driving force behind this choice is the confirmed presence of water ice trapped in the lunar soil.
Yes, the water ice is everything.
Let's really dig into this water ice detail, because I think the instinct for a lot of people is to hear water on the moon and think, oh, great, the astronauts have something to drink. We don't have to pack as many water bottles.
Right, like a cosmic drinking fountain.
Exactly. But hydration is just the tip of the iceberg here, conceptually speaking.
Hydration is almost a secondary benefit, honestly.
Really?
Yeah. The true value of water ice is fundamentally about orbital economics and long-term sustainability. To understand this, you really have to look at the sheer tyranny of the rocket equation.
The rocket equation. Break that down for me.
Launching mass from Earth is incredibly expensive because Earth has a very deep gravity well.
It pulls everything back down.
Right. So every single drop of water, every breath of oxygen, every pound of fuel has to fight immense gravity just to get into space.
So it takes a massive amount of fuel just to lift the fuel itself.
Precisely. That is the core problem of space travel. But water H2O is a chemical goldmine if you find it already up there.
Because you can break it apart.
Yes. Using solar power, you can run an electrical current right through that water in a process called electrolysis.
Which splits the water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen.
Exactly. You capture the oxygen, and suddenly you have a limitless supply of breathable air for your pressurized habitats.
Okay, that's huge.
It gets better. The real magic happens when you capture both the liquid oxygen and the liquid hydrogen,
Why?
because those are the two primary components of high-efficiency cryogenic rocket propellant.
No way. So the water ice isn't just a drinking well, it is a literal gas station.
It is a self-sustaining propellant depot located entirely outside of Earth's massive gravity well.
That changes everything.
It fundamentally changes the entire economic model of space travel. If you can successfully mine that ice, separate it, and liquefy the gases, future missions to Mars, or the outer solar system, they wouldn't have to launch from Earth carrying all their heavy fuel.
Right, because that takes too much fuel to lift.
Exactly. They could launch with just enough fuel to reach the moon, fill their tanks at the South Pole, and then head out into deep space. The moon ceases to be a destination and becomes this vital interplanetary logistics hub.
But getting to that ice, I mean, that requires navigating some of the most extreme geography in the solar system, right?
Yeah.
We aren't talking about just skating on a frozen lunar lake.
No, not at all. The water ice only exists because of the unique geometry of the lunar poles.
How so?
Well, the moon's axis is barely tilted relative to the sun. This means that at the poles, the sun is always sitting right on the horizon. It just circles the horizon.
Okay, I'm picturing that.
So if you were standing on the rim of a deep crater at the South Pole, you might be bathed in constant eternal sunlight.
Which is great for solar panels.
Perfect for solar panels. But the floor of that exact same crater, which could be miles below you, it has not seen a single photon of sunlight in billions of years.
It is in permanent shadow.
Permanent shadow, and those permanently shadowed regions are some of the coldest places in our entire solar system. They act as these massive cold traps.
So the water just gets stuck there.
Exactly. Over billions of years, any water molecules deposited by comets or asteroids migrated across the lunar surface, and eventually they just froze solid in the pitch-black depths of those craters.
Okay, wait. If the ice is down in the pitch black, freezing depths of the crater, and our extraction equipment runs on solar power, how do those two things ever interact?
That is the paradox.
It seems insurmountable. You need the sun to power the base, but the resource you desperately need is in eternal darkness.
Navigating that thermal and topographical gradient is arguably the primary engineering challenge of the next decade.
How do they plan to do it?
You have to build your habitats and your massive solar arrays on the peaks of eternal light, those crater rims.
Yep.
Then you have to somehow send mining equipment down into the abyss, where the ambient temperature will instantly freeze normal lubricants and literally shatter structural metals.
Shatter metal.
Oh, yeah. Extreme cold makes metal brittle. And you have to power that equipment down there, extract the ice, and haul it back up a steep, jagged incline to the rim.
And the agency wants to start construction on this extreme, paradox-filled gas station by 2029. I mean, we are talking less than 3 years from now.
It is an incredibly aggressive schedule.
2029 is tomorrow in the world of aerospace. If the engineering required to build a solar-powered base that extracts ice from a dark, freezing crater is this far beyond our current capabilities, why are we arbitrarily chaining ourselves to the year 2029? What is forcing this breakneck pace?
When you see a timeline that aggressive, applied to an environment that hostile, you have to look beyond the science.
Okay.
This timeline is entirely driven by looking over our shoulder. It is the geopolitical reality of the new space race.
Right. We have to address the elephant in the room here. The reports clearly note that NASA's highly ambitious plan is openly acknowledged to be, and I quote, vague in several aspects.
Yes.
It was conceived, drafted, and pushed forward specifically to compete with China, which is also aggressively aiming to send humans to the moon and establish their own permanent crewed base.
The competitive aspect is the engine driving this entire vehicle right now.
It has to be.
When a major space agency pivots a $20 billion strategy away from a safe orbital station, targets the single most dangerous region of the moon, and sets an eye-wateringly fast deadline of 2029 for a plan that they openly admit is vague, it tells you everything you need to know about the underlying geopolitical panic.
But why would an agency pledge $20 billion to a vague plan? Usually you don't break ground on a house until the blueprints are perfect. Pledging that kind of capital without a finalized engineering roadmap feels incredibly, uncharacteristically risky.
Because in a geopolitical space race, claiming the strategic high ground, or in this case, the water-rich ground, takes precedence over having a perfect blueprint.
Just get there first, figure it out later.
Exactly. Because the strategic value of the lunar South Pole is very finite. There are only a very small handful of prime locations on those crater rims that offer both continuous sunlight for solar power and immediate traversable access to the shadowed regions for water ice.
So it really is a gold rush, but for frozen water. There are only so many plots of riverfront property that have gold in the water.
That's it, exactly. If another nation establishes a permanent operational presence on those prime locations first, they effectively control the logistics hub of the entire future lunar economy.
Because they have the power in the gas station.
They get the solar power, they get the ice, and they control the access routes. So the vagueness of the 2029 plan is just a direct byproduct of the necessity for speed. You commit the budget, you set the deadline, and you just force the engineering teams to catch up. It is a classic fire-ready aim approach.
But think about the implications of this for a moment. I want to ask you, does this kind of intense neck-and-neck competition actually result in better science and more robust engineering? Or does it just introduce dangerous schedule pressure? Like, are we prioritizing planting a flag on a crater rim over having a solid, rigorously tested blueprint for human survival?
That tension right there is the defining characteristic of modern spaceflight.
Really?
Historically, yes, competition has spurred incredible leaps in technological innovation. Look at the Apollo program, the Saturn V rocket, the lunar module. None of that would have happened without the existential pressure of the Cold War.
True.
The sheer volume of funding and political will generated by a race forces breakthroughs that might otherwise take decades. However, you're absolutely right that it introduces massive schedule risks.
Because when you compress a timeline from 10 years to 3 years, you have to cut out the testing iterations.
You reduce the testing. You end up relying on unproven prototype systems. You accept much higher margins of risk across the board.
And when you are dealing with the lunar environment,
higher risk margins translate directly to a much higher probability of catastrophic failure.
and imagine the diplomatic nightmare if both global superpowers are simultaneously trying to claim the exact same strategic water ice deposits at the South Pole. How does that even work legally? Space law is notoriously sparse, right?
It is very sparse. The foundational document is the Outer Space Treaty of 1967.
Right.
And it strictly prohibits any nation from claiming sovereign territory on the moon or any other celestial body. You cannot just plant a flag and declare this crater belongs to us.
Okay, so no one owns the moon.
Technically. However, the treaty has significant operational loopholes, primarily revolving around this concept of safety zones.
Safety zone. So you can't own the land, but you can put up, like, do not cross tape.
Essentially, yes. The treaty allows for the establishment of facilities. If you build a multi-billion-dollar ice extraction base, you can establish a perimeter around that base where other entities are not allowed to interfere with your operations under the justification of safety.
Because it's dangerous equipment.
Right. You cannot claim ownership of the regolith itself, but you can definitely dictate who is allowed to operate near it.
Which means whoever gets their infrastructure down first, whoever have the robotic vanguard pouring that foundation and deploying those solar arrays first, dictates the operational reality on the ground.
They set the rules of engagement for that entire region. That is exactly why 2029 is the magic number.
It's a blockade.
Yes. It is not a scientific milestone where all the technology suddenly matures. It is a strategic blockade. It is a race to establish the safety zone before anyone else can.
But as we know from any complex project, when you rush a vague plan to beat a rival, the pressure finds the weak points.
Always.
And recently, a very specific, incredibly expensive weak point broke in a spectacular fashion.
We have to look at the bottleneck of the billionaires here.
We do. This is where the grand 2029 vision collides violently with physical reality. NASA's lunar ambitions are currently facing major, very public setbacks following the spectacular explosion this spring of the New Glenn rocket.
Which was a massive blow.
For context, this is a massive, heavy-lift orbital rocket built by tech billionaire Jeff Bezos' company, Blue Origin.
And it was a catastrophic hardware failure, right at a critical juncture in the timeline.
Senior agency officials have had to openly acknowledge that this explosion is likely going to cause lunar program delays. But the way they are handling it publicly is fascinating to me.
The phrasing was very deliberate.
Right. The NASA program manager for the moon base, Carlos Garcia Galan, made a very carefully worded statement. He said, and I quote, "We're working with Blue Origin very closely to understand their timelines to recovery and also looking at other options in case it doesn't meet our timeline."
That right there is a masterclass in diplomatic pressure.
It sounds polite, but it feels like there's absolute steel underneath that quote.
Oh, there is. When a program manager publicly states that they're looking at other options for a mission-critical component, it is an enormous warning shot across the bow of the contractor.
They are threatening to walk.
Absolutely. and it reveals the acute vulnerability of NASA's current operational model.
I really want to break down that vulnerability. Because for the last decade, the prevailing narrative has been that commercial spaceflight is the ultimate solution.
Right.
Companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin are supposed to be cheaper, faster, and more innovative than the old, slow government bureaucracy that built the space shuttle.
And in many ways, that commercial model has revolutionized low Earth orbit. I mean, the cost to launch a kilogram of mass into space has plummeted.
Sure.
But there is a flip side to that coin that we are seeing play out right now. Under the old model, NASA owned the rocket.
They built it.
They designed it, they managed the day-to-day engineering, they dictated the safety culture from top to bottom. Now NASA relies on these fixed-price commercial contracts.
They just buy the ticket.
Exactly. They have handed over an immense amount of control. They're no longer the builders, they are simply the customer waiting for a delivery.
And if the delivery truck explodes on the launch pad, the customer is just stuck on the curb.
Furthermore, they are stuck with a supply chain that they do not control. NASA contracted Blue Origin to develop a highly advanced, multi-billion-dollar lunar lander.
Right, the vehicle that actually lands on the moon.
Right, the actual spacecraft that will ferry equipment and eventually humans from orbit down to the surface. But that lander, no matter how advanced it is completely useless if it doesn't have a heavy-lift rocket capable of carrying it out of Earth's gravity in the first place.
And New Glenn was supposed to be that rocket.
The New Glenn rocket was supposed to be that delivery mechanism.
Put yourself in the shoes of a NASA engineer right now. You have this incredibly sophisticated lander. It is packed with cutting-edge scientific instruments. It might even hold pieces of that $600 million robotic Vanguard we talked about earlier.
Almost certainly.
It is sitting in a pristine, clean room warehouse, fully built, theoretically ready to go to the moon. And it is a high-tech paperweight because the billionaire's rocket that was supposed to carry it literally blew up.
It is the ultimate supply chain nightmare, magnified to a planetary scale. And it highlights just how fragile the 2029 deadline truly is. Reaching the moon by that date doesn't just require one piece of technology to work perfectly. It requires an incredibly complex, interconnected chain of technologies, many of which are being built by completely different, fiercely competitive commercial companies.
So if one link snaps,
if one rocket engine fails a test, the entire timeline collapses like a house of cards.
When Garcia Gallin says they're actively looking at alternatives to launch the lander, that tells me the agency is sweating.
Oh, they are.
They are terrified of losing the geopolitical race to the South Pole simply because a private contractor couldn't get their engines to stop exploding.
It demonstrates a willingness to ruthlessly pivot. If Blue Origin cannot guarantee a recovered, flight-proven, safe rocket in time to meet the 2029 window, NASA will absolutely strip them of the launch duties.
Who would they even use?
They will find another launch provider, perhaps a SpaceX Falcon Heavy or an upcoming Starship, even if it means spending millions to redesign the payload adapters and integration hardware at the absolute last minute.
Just to make it fit a different rocket.
Yes. They cannot let the schedule slip, because the geopolitical competitor eyeing those exact same water ice craters is not going to wait for Blue Origin to fix their telemetry issues.
This desperate, overriding need to keep the 2029 dream alive, despite exploding rockets and fragile commercial supply chains, it's forcing the agency to get uncomfortably creative with the actual hardware they plan to deploy on the surface.
We are definitely moving past traditional engineering and into the realm of improvisation.
The level of on-the-fly improvisation being seriously discussed in these reports is unprecedented for a space agency that usually plans missions a decade or more in advance.
It really is.
NASA has started to roll out the vision for the tech roster of this lunar base. We are talking about next-generation lunar landers, specialized rovers, and surprisingly, drones designed to rapidly survey the chaotic terrain.
That's a huge shift in mobility.
Right. Their infrastructure goals explicitly include establishing a full power grid and pressurized habitats. But the single most shocking detail, the one that forces you to realize just how tight this timeline is that NASA floated the very real possibility of repurposing a Mars rover to use on the moon.
It blurs the line between brilliant adaptability and sheer engineering desperation.
Before we tackle the madness of the Mars rover, let's break down the rest of this tech list, because even the baseline requirements sound like science fiction.
They do.
Let's start with the power grid on the moon. What does a lunar power grid actually look like in practice?
Well, establishing a power grid at the lunar South Pole is a staggering challenge.
Yeah.
As we discussed, you're placing your solar arrays on the high crater rims to catch the eternal sunlight.
Right.
But your massive power sinks, the thermal regulation for the habitats, the ice mining drills, the rovers, those might be operating miles away, deep inside the permanently shadowed, freezing crater floors.
So how do you bridge that gap? Do you just run a really long extension cord down a cliff?
Running physical cables is one option, but it is fraught with issues.
Like what?
You would need extremely long, heavily insulated superconducting cables just to minimize power loss over that distance. These cables are incredibly heavy. Transporting spools of heavy cable to the moon is incredibly expensive, and deploying them autonomously using robots down a jagged, glassy incline is a logistical nightmare.
Oh, right. The glass dust would probably shred the cables anyway.
Exactly. The alternative, which is seriously being researched right now, is directed energy.
Directed energy, like beaming power.
Yes. Using high-powered lasers or microwave transmitters located on the sunlit rim to beam energy directly to receivers on the equipment operating in the dark crater.
Wait, really? Lasers powering mining drills?
It's completely viable, theoretically. But beaming megawatts of power via laser across a dusty, dynamic environment where astronauts might eventually be walking introduces a whole new array of safety and efficiency concerns.
I would imagine walking in front of that laser would be bad.
Very bad. Both options, superconducting cables and laser transmission, are bleeding-edge technologies that have never been tested at this scale in a lunar environment, and they need this operational by 2029.
And what about the drones? The report specifically mentions drones designed to survey the terrain. If I buy a drone at a camera store, it has 4 propellers, right? It flies by pushing air down to create lift?
Yes, aerodynamic lift.
How do you fly a drone on the moon, where there's absolutely zero atmosphere to push against? Propellers would just spin uselessly in a vacuum.
You cannot use aerodynamic lift. A traditional drone is completely useless. When the agency uses the term lunar drone, they're talking about a completely different paradigm of flight. They're essentially talking about propulsive hoppers.
Hoppers.
A hopper is a small autonomous vehicle equipped with highly precise, miniaturized rocket thrusters instead of propellers.
Oh.
To survey the terrain, it would fire a burst of chemical thrust to leap off the ground, follow a calculated ballistic arc over the craters, take its survey photos or sensor readings while in suborbital flight, and then fire retro rockets to land softly on the other side.
It is effectively a miniature rocket ship executing hundreds of tiny successive launches and landings.
Exactly.
The fuel management alone sounds impossible.
It is incredibly complex. The autonomous navigation has to be flawless to avoid crashing into boulders. The fuel budget is strictly limited. And every time the hopper takes off or lands, the rocket exhaust violently kicks up that abrasive, glass-like regolith we talked about.
Which would damage it.
Potentially damaging its own sensors or any nearby equipment, yes. But the advantage is speed. A hopping drone can survey a highly chaotic, heavily cratered region in a fraction of the time it would take a wheeled rover to carefully navigate around every single rock. When your deadline is 2029, speed of surveying is paramount.
So we have laser power grids and rocket-powered jumping drones. That is the baseline. But then we hit the Mars rover revelation. NASA is seriously considering taking a rover that was designed and engineered specifically for Mars and repurposing it for the moon, simply to save time on development.
From a systems engineering standpoint, it is a staggering proposition.
Think about what they are suggesting. It's like taking a custom-built, high-end desert off-roading vehicle and frantically trying to retrofit it to survive an Arctic blizzard just because you don't have the time to build a snowmobile from scratch.
The environmental differences between Mars and the moon are just as extreme as the desert and the Arctic. People tend to group them together as generic space environments, but to a machine, they could not be more distinct.
Let's dissect this. Why is a Mars rover fundamentally a bad fit for the lunar surface? Let's start with gravity.
Okay, gravity is huge. Mars has roughly 1/3 of Earth's gravity. The moon has 1/6.
So half the gravity of Mars.
Right. When engineers design a Mars rover, every aspect of its chassis is meticulously calibrated for that specific 1/3 gravitational pull. The suspension system, the shock absorbers, the traction control algorithms, the way the wheels bite into the soil, it is all tuned for Mars.
So if you drop that exact same rover onto the moon,
It is suddenly twice as light as it was designed to be.
it wouldn't drive correctly at all.
It would bounce unpredictably over rocks. It might lose traction entirely on loose slopes. And if it needs to dig or drill into the ice, it might not be able to exert enough downward force against the lower lunar gravity to actually penetrate the surface.
Because it just pushes itself up instead.
Exactly.
Okay, so the entire suspension and traction system is wrong. What else?
The thermal environment.
Right, the temperature.
Mars has an atmosphere. It is very thin, mostly carbon dioxide, but it exists. That thin atmosphere provides a tiny bit of thermal regulation and convection cooling. Mars gets very cold, but the temperature swings are somewhat moderated by the air.
But the moon has zero atmosphere.
Right. The temperature transition from full baking sunlight to pure freezing shadow is instantaneous. We're talking about swings of hundreds of degrees in seconds.
So the rover's heaters and coolers wouldn't keep up.
A Mars rover's thermal management system, its radiators, its internal heaters, its insulation, is simply not designed to handle the instantaneous, raw thermal shock of the lunar vacuum.
The onboard computers would either freeze solid or overheat almost immediately.
Exactly. And then there is the final, most destructive element, the dust.
We are back to the jagged glass.
We are always back to the glass. Mars dust and lunar dust are fundamentally different materials. Mars has weather, it has wind, and massive global dust storms that can last for months.
So the dust gets blown around a lot.
Right. And over billions of years, that wind has tumbled and eroded the Martian dust particles, smoothing off their sharp edges. Martian dust is pervasive, and it is a nuisance, but it is relatively smooth, somewhat like fine talcum powder.
Okay, but lunar dust, as we discussed, has never experienced wind or water erosion. Every single particle is a microscopic razor-sharp shard.
So a seal, or a mechanical joint, designed to keep out smooth Martian talcum powder.
We'll get absolutely shredded by lunar glass.
Within days, the regolith would grind away the seals, infiltrate the bearings, and destroy the moving parts.
Wow.
Repurposing a Mars rover means you have to somehow retrofit every exposed seal, every wheel bearing, every joint to withstand a highly abrasive material it was never meant to encounter, all while dealing with the wrong gravity and a thermal environment that will shock the systems.
And they're considers this purely because of the clock. Because designing a lunar-specific rover from a blank sheet of paper takes years of design, iteration, and testing.
Years that they simply do not have if they are chained to 2029.
It highlights a borderline desperation.
It does. It shows incredible adaptability. I mean, the fact that engineers can even conceive of hot-swapping planetary hardware like this is a testament to human ingenuity.
Okay.
But it also reveals the immense, looming risk profile they are operating under. When you start cannibalizing complex hardware built for a completely different planet just to hit a politically driven deadline, you are walking a very dangerous tightrope.
It is truly breathtaking to step back and look at the sheer velocity of this entire operation. We're watching an agency fundamentally rewrite its operational playbook in real time, under the most intense pressure imaginable.
And they are attempting to do it largely by coordinating an orchestra of commercial contractors who are themselves experiencing catastrophic hardware failures and supply chain bottlenecks.
Let's do a rapid-fire recap of everything we've explored today, because we have covered an immense amount of ground.
We really have.
We started by looking at the robotic vanguard, that initial $600 million wave of commercial contracts designed to drop instruments and autonomously pour the foundation for a permanent presence.
Right, the autonomous builders.
Then we dissected the massive $20 billion grand pivot, exploring why NASA dramatically abandoned its safe, pristine orbital gateway station to commit to the abrasive, dangerous dirt of the lunar surface.
And we identified the location of that dirt, the highly strategic lunar South Pole, chosen specifically for its deep crater deposits of water ice, which serves as the foundational economic resource for all future deep space exploration.
Because it's a gas station. We looked at the geopolitical engine driving this frantic timeline, too. The high-stakes race against China to claim the prime real estate on those South Pole crater rims and establish operational safety zones.
The race that's forcing all of these risky decisions.
Exactly. We examined the explosive bottleneck threatening the whole endeavor, with Blue Origin's new Glenn rocket failure forcing the agency to issue diplomatic threats and scramble for alternative launch options.
Because the supply chain is so fragile.
Right. And finally, we unpack the absolute wild extremes of the tech roster, from theoretical laser power grids and rocket-powered hoppers to the desperate MacGyver move of trying to retrofit a Mars rover to survive the jagged glass dust of the moon.
It is a profound shift from the methodical, step-by-step scientific exploration of the past several decades into an era of rapid, high-stakes, geopolitically fueled infrastructure deployment.
And that brings us to a final thought, something I want you to really mull over as you go about the rest of your day.
Yeah.
We have talked extensively about the incredible, desperate lengths we are going to in order to meet this 2029 deadline.
Right.
We are aggressively sending a vanguard of robots to lay down power grids and build pressurized habitats right now.
Right.
We are rushing timelines, accepting massive risk margins, and even cannibalizing mismatched wrong planet rovers just to get the foundation built.
The autonomous robotic construction phase is basically taking precedence over the human element.
Right. So what happens if that works? What happens if these brilliant autonomous systems successfully pull it off?
That's a fascinating question.
The solar arrays deploy on the crater rooms. The directed energy lasers or the superconducting cables are laid down into the dark. The habitats pressurized with oxygen extracted from the ancient ice.
It's all working?
The base is sitting there, humming with power, fully sustainable, waiting in the dark at the South Pole, but the human delivery system remains broken. What if commercial heavy-lift rocket failures, like the ones we are seeing right now, compound and delay the actual human missions for years? Are we accidentally, frantically building the solar system's most expensive, fully powered, pressurized ghost town? Let that sink in.